Gabby sat at her desk, bathed in the pale glow of her computer screen, eyes scanning the array of lines of code she had spent hours debugging. It was her usual evening ritual, editing videos for her tech YouTube channel, managing comments from her growing community, and troubleshooting software glitches. It provided a sort of comfort, and order and structure she could always control. But tonight, that comforting sense of routine felt elusive. A knot formed in her chest, fueled by the steady stream of messages on her phone from David's mother, Priscilla. "I hope you're taking good care of my son. He shouldn't have to worry about finances with you being so successful, right?" The last message read. Gabby sighed, pressing her fingers into her temples. Priscilla's passive-aggressive barbs had become more frequent and cutting since she and David had married 6 months ago. She had tried to brush off the comments at first, but they stung, reminding her of the growing tension that festered beneath the surface. David's initial charm, his boyish good looks, quick wit, and shared interest in tech, had drawn her in. They had connected online through a forum for IT enthusiasts, and their relationship quickly blossomed over long discussions about artificial intelligence, digital privacy, and the future of technology. Marriage had seemed like the natural next step, especially after months of shared late-night conversations, visits, and plans for a life together. Yet, as soon as the wedding vows were exchanged, a change in David's demeanor began to creep in. His enthusiasm for work waned, and his dependence on her income grew. At first, she had told herself it was a temporary adjustment, everyone has rough patches. But then came the day he revealed he'd quit his job. "I just can't do it anymore, Gabby," he'd said, his tone more dismissive than remorseful. "You're doing great with your channel. We can manage on that for a while." As if her income and hard work were now a shared burden. But what had hurt most was the flippant way he had announced it, as though his choice didn't need discussion, as though it were a minor inconvenience. Gabby hadn't said anything at the time. She had been too stunned, too focused on fixing a glitch in her video editing software. But the feeling of unease grew. And Priscilla's increasingly intrusive behavior wasn't helping. David was in the living room, scrolling through his phone when Gabby finally emerged. She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorway, watching him. He didn't look up. "David, can we talk?" she said, keeping her voice steady. He finally glanced up, raising a brow. "Sure. What's up? What's going on with your mother?" Gabby asked, diving straight into it. "She's been way too involved in our lives, and it's starting to feel invasive." David sighed, dropping his phone onto the couch beside him. "You're overreacting, Gabby. She's just trying to help." "Help? By appraising a painting from my family without even asking me? She had no right to do that." Gabby's voice rose, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I told her it was okay," David shrugged. "It's not a big deal." Gabby felt her heart skip a beat. "You what?" "I figured you'd appreciate the value. You've been so busy with your work, I thought we could get ahead of things. It's not like we were planning on selling it or anything." "But it wasn't your decision to make," Gabby shot back. "That painting means a lot to my family. It's personal." David leaned back, looking unbothered. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Mom's just... Your mom is overstepping. And you don't seem to care." For a moment, David was silent, his expression darkening. "Gabby, I think you need to relax. My mom just wants the best for us. You act like she's the enemy." Gabby shook her head, feeling the cold reality settling in. Something had shifted between them, something she couldn't quite put into words yet, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. Priscilla wasn't just meddling, she was driving a wedge between them. And David was letting her. The conversation went nowhere after that. David brushed off her concerns, and Gabby withdrew into the solitude of her office, trying to ignore the gnawing sense that something far worse was brewing. The morning after their argument, Gabby's suspicions festered. She couldn't shake the feeling that David and Priscilla were working together behind her back. There was something about the way David had downplayed his mother's interference that didn't sit right with her. The painting had been the last straw in a long series of increasingly bold moves from Priscilla. Deciding she couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling any longer, Gabby installed a hidden camera in their living room. She wasn't proud of it, it felt sneaky, paranoid even, but something about David's recent behavior had eroded the trust she once had. It wasn't just about the painting, it was the way he had quit his job, assuming she would carry the weight. It was the dismissive tone in his voice, the way he seemed to be slipping away from her emotionally, becoming someone she barely recognized. Days passed, and Gabby went about her routine, her anxiety building. Each time she walked into the house, a weight settled on her chest, making it harder to breathe. David had begun spending more time away from home, supposedly to clear his head. He rarely offered an explanation for where he went, and Gabby no longer asked. Then, one evening, as Gabby sat in her office editing a video, she heard voices in the living room. Her heart skipped a beat. David wasn't home, or so she thought. Quietly, she reached for her laptop, opening the feed from the hidden camera. What she saw froze her blood. David and Priscilla stood by the fireplace, the painting, a family heirloom passed down through generations, resting between them. "I told you, it's worth more than we thought," Priscilla whispered, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "We can sell it overseas. Gabby will never know." David nodded, his face expressionless. "She's too focused on her work. She won't miss it until it's too late." Gabby's pulse quickened, her breath catching in her throat. She leaned in closer to the screen, watching in disbelief as David and his mother laid out their plan to deceive her, to sell the painting behind her back and use the money to, what? Support David's aimless, jobless life? Priscilla's voice dripped with contempt. "She's so naive, David. Always working, always thinking she's in control. But we're the ones with the upper hand now. Once we have the money, you won't need her anymore." Gabby's hands trembled as she closed the laptop, her mind racing. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. David, the man she had married, the man she had trusted, was plotting against her with his own mother. The revelation was like a knife in her chest. The marriage was over. It had to be. But Gabby wasn't one to go down without a fight. Gabby knew she had to move fast. David and Priscilla were clearly in no rush, confident in their deception. That would work to her advantage. First, she contacted her lawyer, laying out the situation in stark detail, providing the hidden camera footage as proof. "We have a strong case," her lawyer assured her. "This isn't just about the painting. This is fraud, plain and simple. We'll hit them with everything we have." Gabby felt a mixture of relief and fury as she hung up the phone. The betrayal was still fresh, like an open wound, but now she had a plan, a way to fight back. David, oblivious to her newfound knowledge, continued his charade for the next few days. He even suggested they go out for dinner one night, trying to act like the attentive husband he had once been. Gabby played along, watching him closely, every false smile and empty word deepening her resolve. And then, she filed for divorce. David's reaction was immediate and explosive. He stormed into the house the morning the papers arrived, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell, Gabby? Divorce? Are you serious?" Gabby stood her ground, arms crossed. "You didn't leave me much of a choice." "What's that supposed to mean?" David's voice rose, his frustration palpable. "It means I know what you've been planning. You and your mother," Gabby said, her voice cold and steady. "I know about the painting. About the lies. About everything." David's face went pale for a moment, his confidence faltering. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Gabby stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "You thought you could use me. Take advantage of me. But you underestimated me, David. I have proof. Video proof of you and your mother planning to commit fraud." David's mouth opened, then closed. He looked desperate, like a man cornered. Gabby didn't give him a chance to respond. "You and your mother will face consequences for what you've done. And as for the divorce, don't expect a penny from me." The courtroom buzzed with tension as Gabby sat beside her lawyer, her heart racing despite her outward calm. Across the room, David sat with Priscilla, both wearing carefully rehearsed expressions of wounded innocence. It was almost laughable, if not for the high stakes. Priscilla had gone to great lengths to paint Gabby as the villain in their twisted narrative, claiming that she had emotionally neglected David, driving him to quit his job and seek solace in his mother's care. David, following his mother's lead, played the role of the dutiful son who had simply wanted to help his wife manage her assets. But Gabby had the truth on her side. The hidden camera footage, along with the records of her steady income supporting their lifestyle, painted a starkly different picture. As the evidence unfolded before the judge, Priscilla's smug composure began to crack. David, on the other hand, kept his eyes downcast, refusing to meet Gabby's gaze. When Gabby's lawyer played the recording of David and Priscilla discussing the sale of the painting, the courtroom fell silent. The damning audio, combined with the legal documents Gabby had meticulously gathered, left no room for doubt. David and Priscilla had conspired against her, and now they were facing the consequences. The judge's ruling was swift. David's alimony claim was denied, and both he and Priscilla were ordered to face fraud charges for their attempt to deceive Gabby. It was a victory, a hard-fought, well-earned victory, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like relief. Freedom. As the court adjourned, David approached her one last time, his voice low, almost pleading. "Gabby. I'm sorry. Don't," she interrupted, her voice firm. "It's too late." She turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving him behind, the weight of betrayal lifting from her shoulders. Gabby's first night alone in her new apartment was quiet, almost eerily so. It was a far cry from the life she had envisioned when she first married David, but it was hers, a life no longer overshadowed by deception and manipulation. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, the city lights twinkling through the window. The painting, the one David and Priscilla had tried so hard to steal, hung proudly on the wall behind her. It was a symbol now, not just of her family's history, but of her resilience. She had come through the storm stronger than she ever thought she could be. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, a new comment on her latest YouTube video. Gabby smiled as she picked it up, scanning the supportive messages from her online community. They had no idea about the personal battle she had just won, but their encouragement felt like a warm embrace nonetheless. For the first time in months, Gabby felt truly free. She had built a career she loved, fought for what was right, and emerged from the wreckage of her marriage with her dignity intact. As she sipped her wine, Gabby allowed herself a moment to reflect. The last few months had been a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and legal battles, but now, on the other side, she felt something new stirring inside her, hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain, it would be on her terms. And for Gabby, that was enough. Months passed, and life took on a new rhythm for Gabby. Her YouTube channel thrived, gaining more subscribers as she expanded her content to include personal development, tech reviews, and even glimpses into her newfound journey of independence. The legal battles with David and Priscilla had faded into the background, both were convicted of fraud, given fines, and placed on probation. Gabby had received closure through the courtroom victory, but the emotional wounds took longer to heal. Despite her success and the freedom she now enjoyed, Gabby sometimes found herself haunted by lingering questions. She had always prided herself on being sharp, observant, but how had she missed the warning signs with David? What had blinded her to the depths of his deceit? The emotional bruises left her wary of trusting anyone, and although she had moved forward, she knew that part of her was still tethered to the past. One quiet autumn evening, as she worked on editing a video, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Gabby hesitated before answering. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end, followed by a soft, familiar voice. "Gabby. It's David." Gabby's grip on the phone tightened. She hadn't spoken to him since the day in court. Hearing his voice now sent a cold shiver down her spine. "What do you want, David?" He faltered. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk. Can we meet? One last time?" Gabby's initial reaction was to hang up. Every instinct told her that seeing David again would only stir up emotions she'd rather leave buried. Yet, something in his tone made her pause. There was a vulnerability there, a desperation she hadn't heard before. "Why?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "What could you possibly have to say?" "I just need to explain." "Please," David pleaded. "Just hear me out." Gabby hesitated for a long moment. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him. "Fine. But this is the last time, David." They arranged to meet the following afternoon at a small cafe on the edge of the city. Gabby spent the rest of the evening unsettled, wondering what David could possibly want. She had already moved on, and she wasn't sure if opening old wounds was wise. But perhaps this meeting could finally bring her the closure she hadn't realized she still needed. The cafe was small and cozy, with warm lighting and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Gabby arrived early, choosing a corner table by the window where she could watch the door. Her nerves buzzed under the surface, a mix of anger, anticipation, and curiosity. David arrived 10 minutes late. He looked thinner, his face gaunt, as though the last few months had taken a toll on him. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Gabby. For a brief moment, his expression softened, perhaps at the sight of her, or perhaps at the weight of their shared history, but Gabby remained cold, unmoved by his appearance. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Get to the point," Gabby replied, crossing her arms. David winced at her icy tone but didn't argue. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly trying to find the right words. "I messed up," he began, his voice low. "I know that now. And I know saying sorry isn't enough." Gabby raised an eyebrow. "You're right. It's not." David's shoulders sagged. "After everything that happened, I've had a lot of time to think. About us. About how I let my mom manipulate me. I didn't realize how toxic she was. How toxic I had become. I never should have treated you the way I did." Gabby didn't soften. "You didn't just treat me badly, David. You and your mother plotted to steal from me. You betrayed me. And now you're sitting here like you didn't know what you were doing?" "I knew what I was doing," David admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "But I didn't understand how wrong it was until I lost you." Gabby stared at him, her anger simmering just below the surface. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the regret etched into his face, but it didn't absolve him. She had given him her trust, her love, and he had thrown it away for greed and his mother's approval. "I don't know what you expect from me, David," Gabby said after a long pause. "Forgiveness? Closure? You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. That's life." David nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I regret everything. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to figure out how I got to this point." Gabby felt a flicker of something, empathy, perhaps, but she quickly squashed it. She couldn't afford to feel sorry for David. "Not after everything. Good for you," she said, her tone clipped. "But that doesn't change anything." David's gaze flicked up, meeting hers. "I know. But I want to make things right. I'm planning to sell the house and give you half of whatever I make. It's the least I can do." Gabby stared at him in disbelief. "The house is yours, David. I don't want your money." He looked genuinely surprised. "But you can't buy your way out of this," Gabby interrupted. "This isn't about the house or the money. It's about trust. You destroyed that." David looked defeated, his shoulders slumping further. "I know." Gabby stood up, grabbing her coat. "I appreciate the apology, David, but I think we're done here." As she turned to leave, David's voice stopped her. "Gabby, I really did love you." She paused, her hand on the door. Without turning around, she responded, "Maybe you did. But love isn't enough when there's no trust." With that, she walked out, leaving David behind for good. Gabby didn't look back after that meeting. David's apology, while unexpected, hadn't changed anything for her. It had been the final nail in the coffin of their relationship, an ending she could now accept without anger, but with a sense of peace. She had moved beyond the hurt, beyond the betrayal, and into a future that no longer held the shadows of her past. Her career continued to flourish. Opportunities opened up that she never could have imagined, including a collaboration with a major tech company that wanted to sponsor her channel. She traveled more, met new people, and slowly began to rediscover parts of herself that had been lost in the turmoil of her marriage. The emotional scars David and Priscilla had left behind were healing, though they hadn't disappeared completely. There were still moments when Gabby found herself questioning the motives of others, still flashes of mistrust that crept in when she least expected it. But she was learning to trust again, learning that not everyone was out to hurt her. One afternoon, as she stood by the window of her apartment, looking out over the bustling city below, Gabby realized just how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had once doubted her worth, who had allowed herself to be manipulated and betrayed. She had grown, and with that growth had come strength she hadn't known she possessed. The painting, the one David and Priscilla had tried to steal, now hung proudly in her living room. It was no longer just a family heirloom. It was a symbol of her resilience, a reminder that she had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Gabby smiled, her heart light. The past no longer held power over her. She had faced it, conquered it, and was now free to embrace the future with open arms. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a golden glow, Gabby raised her glass of wine and made a silent toast, to new beginnings, to freedom, and to the woman she had become. If you liked this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.